your ideal client doesn't live inside your head. They're a real living, breathing, thinking person experiencing the world in all that complexity of everything else they've got going on, not in nice, clean isolation like they might be when you sit there and think about it in your own head. One client I had got in touch with me the other week to say that of the 6 people she interviewed, 2 had been in touch with her to sign up for her high ticket program, and a further 3 had taken one-to-one, 1 hour calls from her. And she didn't pitch those to them.
Not how many hundreds of thousands of people are downloading and listening to it. It's what you get personally as the business owner.
You need to be talking in a way that they understand, using the words that they would use. They might, understand on the surface of it what you're saying, but they're not going to have that deep connection and relationship with your words.
Does marketing and content creation ever feel hard and time-consuming? What if it didn't have to be that way?
Join Rob Drummond,
Matthew Bliss,
and me, Pete Daly-Dixon, your ideal companions on the journey to a value-first approach to business growth, here on Help Before You Sell. For the sake of the listener, I think probably the best person to introduce you is you. So who are you? Where are you? What sort of work do you do? Who do you do it for? All the things. Just give us a thumbnail sketch of Katie Spreadbury.
Of course. Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. Yes, like you say, I'm Katie Spreadbury. And I help businesses who are spending far too much time having to convince and persuade people to buy their offers, to create better offers in the first instance, and then talk about them in a way that really connects with people and, makes people instantly know that this is for them. And I do this, my background is market research and psychology. So it's bringing those things together to really, really understand the person and then talk to them in a way that they just get it. And I'm also really, really huge on ethical marketing and making sure that it's no pressure in the sale and none of this FOMO bro marketing. So I love the concept of this podcast. The Help Before You Sell thing just is so in line with how I like to do things. So yeah, I was delighted when you asked me to come along.
There's no product launch formula, evergreen deadlines around here.
Only ethical ones.
Yeah, only ethical ones, yeah.
So I'm very curious to know, because helping before you sell, we always talk about the things that you can give people before they sell to them. But you're the person who helps the people help before they sell with the marketing research component a little bit. We're kind of shoehorning a little bit in there. So could you tell us a bit more about that perspective of things that you do for your clients?
Yeah. So one thing about marketing that we need to sort of flip the way we think about it is that we think of marketing often as very much a broadcast medium. We're putting out a podcast, it's us standing here talking, and it's going in one direction. But that's not what marketing is anymore. Marketing is a two-way thing. And even in this situation where obviously there's no one else here on the call at the moment, but you're going to share it and people can comment on the social posts about it. They can reply to emails about it. And these things go two-way. For me, it all comes down to making sure your marketing is a relationship with the people that you are, that you want to serve, rather than you just going out and saying, I've got this thing, who wants it? You want it, don't you? Come on, you want it. Which I think is unhelpful for everyone, really.
Yeah, the build it and they will come kind of thing. It very rarely works. I think you have to be very special to make that happen.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think this concept of marketing not being a broadcast tool is actually quite old. I was wondering if you'd read The Book of Gossage by a guy called Howard Gossage.
No, I haven't. It's Seth Godin's work that I've gone deep on in terms of the marketing with people rather than at people. But what's it have in that book? I'm always interested to learn, add to my reading list.
So Howard Gossage ran an ad agency in San Francisco in the 1960s. So he's a direct mail guy. And compared to Ogilvy and some of these other people who just used to almost blast out the same message and then A/B split test. And what he did was actually advertise to much smaller lists. And he used to run one ad at a time. And there would always be a coupon response and mechanism for people to reply into. He tracked, did people respond to that ad? And then what did they reply with? And then he wrote the next ad based on the responses they had to the previous ad. And they did some fairly substantial things. They launched a petroleum brand nationwide across the US, all on quite a small budget by using small lists that actually were more interactive with the audience. And I think actually Howard Gossage was doing social media about 50 plus years before social media actually became a thing. So
that's amazing. And I think that's what's really, I think, valuable about that is being able to target the message, and by having a smaller list, being able to be that bit more specific with what you're talking about. And I mean, let's face it, one of our jobs of going out there and marketing ourselves is to get attention. And the best way to do that is to be as specific as possible to what the person is thinking, feeling, the situation that they find themselves in, everything that's going on. And when you're trying to talk to everyone, that is obviously very, very difficult. But yeah, making those lists smaller allows you to be that bit more targeted, allows you to understand each group better, I guess.
yeah, it's harder to join the conversation going on in someone's head when that person is actually multiple people having multiple different conversations at different levels of awareness.
Exactly.
Like, is that kind of the task, is figuring out, well, what is the conversation currently going on in their head, and how do I join it?
I think that's a massive part of it, yeah. And that's why there's so much talk in the online business world, isn't there, about niching down, because it's great to be able to do all those things that you were saying, that Gossage was saying, but the resource to do that is going to be, like, the resource needed to do that effectively on a large scale is going to be phenomenal. So the idea of picking someone, a niche, for want of a better word, allows you to narrow that down and, like, just speak to a very specific group of people who then will hopefully see what you're saying and resonate with it and come to you. Like, I hesitate to use the word niche just because it has a lot of negative energy around it these days. Like, a lot of people hear it and whoa, But I think when I talk about niche, I'm not talking about speaking to Sarah, age 47, in the home counties, who has 2 cats and is starting her own business and blah, 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 and shops at Waitrose and da, da, da. What I'm talking about is niching on the problem you solve and the way that impacts people. So what I always say to people when they're figuring out who they're for, it's concentrate on how the problem, like what problems they're facing, but then also how they need that problem solved. So there's no point pitching a diet that's high in lean proteins like chicken to a vegan. The way they want things solved is going to be different. So it's about looking at the things that actually matter to the way you would deliver your service and the way you would talk about your service, rather than just trying to fill in a avatar worksheet with anything that random characteristics and
or like saying it's plumbers in Leicester or electricians in Stoke or something.
Because I mean, electricians in Stoke, that's on one hand a very narrow niche, because they're electricians, they're in Stoke, it's obvious who they are. But there might be the electrician who is focused on doing very small jobs, lots of small jobs. There's the ones who do like big corporate stuff, and the way they're addressing problems might be very different. So it's about thinking about those sorts of characteristics.
I kind of think that anyone who serves a big geographic area, like, I think niching by problem is the way to go, surely.
Yes, I think it's got to be. I mean, in a local area, you do have a captive audience, so that's a lot easier. But when you are looking more widely, niche by problem is for the sorts of industries that I'm in and I deal with, which is the sort of service-based, whether it's coaching, consulting, like I work with designers, any sort of experts who are sharing their skills, whether that's by doing things for people or by teaching other people to do things. Niching by problem does seem to be the one that is most effective. Yeah.
How do you kind of go deeper into the problem? I mean, do you kind of delve into like the symptoms that people are experiencing and like the way that problem manifests? Is there a deeper level that you can go to?
Yeah. So when it comes to the problems people are facing, I guess what I should be clear about here, because there's the problem that you think the person has, and there's the problem that they think they have. Or rather, should I say, as the expert, there's a problem they have, but that is how you deliver your service. That is how you solve the problem for them. But in terms of actually talking to them and helping them, if they don't know they have that problem, then anything you're putting out there about it isn't actually going to help them, because they're not going to see it as relevant to them. I'll give you an example. So, Peter, you work with people to get their podcasts out. If you have someone who says they want to start a podcast and their first issue is they don't know how to do it, so they'll go and find a course that shows them how to do it. Great. but they're still not doing it. So they think, oh, I just don't have time to do this. So they're going out, working out how to get more time to do, like, how can I time management, like courses and time blocking and productivity hacks and things like that. As the expert, you might know the reason that it's always bottom of their to-do list is that actually they're really anxious about putting themselves out there, and they're not in a right place mentally yet to actually stand up and say, this is what I stand for, this is what I believe in, I'm prepared to share it publicly in a forum that, is going to be, podcasts stick around for years, don't they? They're not like live on Facebook, which is gone within a week. They stick around for ages. And if it's that they're not secure enough in those beliefs and confident enough and they're anxious, you might be able to see that as the expert as the reason. But if they're looking for time management hacks, then all your content about gaining confidence and conviction and things like that, it's just going to wash over their heads. They're not going to even give it the time of day, and long enough to get to your carefully constructed arguments about what they need to do about it.
So I know we're just using that as an example, and hopefully the listener will be able to extrapolate for their own business. Does that mean that we should start putting content out, the equivalent of how to manage your time better so you can have time for it, to kind of enter that conversation that's going on in their head? Or should the education be about educating them about the real issue?
So it's a bit of both. You need to meet them where they're at to get their attention. The hook might be something like the real reason you never have time to do your podcast. And then when you have spoken to them about that, empathize, like explain back to them what their situation looks like, what it looks like when they put podcast on their to-do list, and then by the end of the week it's like still not done, like the steps and thought processes they go through. Then you've got them, then they see you understand them, so they're more open to listening to your expert view on why that's actually happening for them, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. You mentioned that you come at your work with clients, Katie, from market research and psychological perspective. Is that your background? What kind of, what's a bit of your story that's led you into doing what you do now?
Yeah, so it was so I always worked in market research. It was a big joke in the market research industry that no one wants to be a market research. Everyone who's in it is just a failed advertiser, or they fell into it through some other means.
It's the same in marketing. No one wants to be a marketer when they grow up.
But I actually sought it out as a career. I actually went out there. I was doing a psychology degree at university. I loved that whole process of going and finding out information and, sort of probing with questions, and whether it was writing surveys and I love filling in surveys as well, to be honest with you, whether it was writing surveys or having conversations or whatever. I love that whole knowledge gathering and finding out something that no one else knew yet. And so, yeah, I actually sought it out as a career. And so I worked for 12, 13 years for some of the biggest agencies in the country, working with big brands, big employers. I did a lot of work for government, evaluating policy and their communications and things like that. But then when I had my children, I always knew when I had children, the 9 to 5 wasn't going to be where I went back to. So I started my own business. At first, I was the classic, hi, I do market research. Does anyone want any market research? Can I draw you a pie chart? And funnily enough, no one was that interested. No one was that excited. So then I had to learn the marketing side of it and learn this way of, I realized I had the skills to do it. I just had to learn how to then turn that into marketing that made people sit up and take notice. And then that's what I help people do now.
Because the market research is the drill and not the whole.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, it is very much the tool. I did have a coach once who said to me, I don't ever want to hear the words market research in your marketing ever again.
It's not the most, I'm trying to find what the right word is. Sexy topic?
Yeah.
No,
and it definitely, I definitely am happy to confess to being an absolute nerd, but it's, I find it fascinating. And I think it's one of the missing things in the sort of, certainly in the online business world circles that I'm moving, which is very focused on like the coaching and the marketing and the getting stuff out there side. But you're given an ideal client avatar worksheet, told to fill it in, and then everyone sits there and thinks really hard about it and fills it in. But your ideal client doesn't live inside your head. They're a real living, breathing, thinking person experiencing the world in all that complexity of everything else they've got going on, not in nice, clean isolation that they might be when you sit there and think about it in your own head. So I think that I'm like, talk about help before you sell. What I hope that I'm bringing to my part of the online business market, is that appreciation and that knowledge of going out and actually having these conversations and talking to people and getting this information like from the horse's mouth, as it were, because it's not just a case of going out there and, like we say, just talking at people. You need to be talking in a way that they understand, using the words that they would use, because you're joining in that conversation in their head. And if in their head they wouldn't be saying the words that you're using, then they might, understand on the surface a bit what you're saying, but they're not going to have that deep connection and relationship with your words.
And how do you do that with your clients? How do you get your clients to go and talk to people? Can we just get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, so to speak?
And is it conversations as opposed to like the quantitative survey or poll type?
Yes. The businesses I work with, it tends to be conversations rather than the surveys, because I think with the surveys, you need a lot of responses to get anything useful from it. So it's quite hard to get people to fill out surveys now. And like when I see someone I'm following, like someone whose email list I'm on, pop into my inbox with, oh, can you just fill in my quick survey? It's only 10 questions. Then I open it up and it's 10 questions, each of which require an essay. I think, yeah, that was quick for you to write, but that's going to take me
for
at least
£5
half an hour.
Starbucks voucher.
Just no.
The worst part is when it's a £5 Starbucks voucher and they send you it in dollars. I'm like, guys, like,
or an Amazon voucher, they send it from Amazon.com. So
.com, yeah, great.
So for my clients, it tends not to be surveys, but if I'm working with a bigger company who have the budget and have the ability to go out and do a bigger exercise, we will. But I tend to work with smaller businesses. And I think the real richness of conversation and the real depth of what people say is far better achieved through conversations. I think if you ask someone a question, there's a great Rory Sutherland quote, if you're familiar with him. It's something along the lines of, the trouble with market research is people don't say what they don't think what they feel, and they don't do what they say they're going to do. I've totally butchered that. But basically, people talk nonsense if you try and ask them direct questions. So it's more about finding out.
Watch what they do, not what they say.
Yes. It's more about finding out from them what is actually going on in their lives, what are they actually experiencing, and then piecing that together yourself as the expert, not going out and saying, what do you want? But yes, you asked how I get my clients to do this. I think there are 3 interesting groups of people to speak to when you're trying to do this. There are the people who have just bought your thing, and they are the absolute best group to speak to, because they know they've just made that decision, and they can tell you like what excited them about it, what they're hoping to get out of it, why they did it, to an extent why they did it. Obviously, like I say, people don't always know their reasons, but you can get why they think they know they did it. So it's people that just bought.
When you say just bought, how soon after that kind of the transaction, if you like, that made them a client, how soon are you suggesting that we have that conversation?
So quite soon. I encourage my clients to do it through in their onboarding. Most of them are working with people one-to-one, or they've got a course, so we put it on the in the onboarding, so it's fresh in their minds. Because I think the further they go through the course, they see what it is, or the program. Sorry, their expectations change, and they might start post-rationalizing based on what's actually there. But you want the in the moment, what was important to them, what was it that caught their attention and made them think, yes, that's for me. Then there's the people that nearly bought but didn't. So the people that clicked on the sales page a few times but didn't follow through. The people who you got on the sales call but they didn't end up taking you up on the offer. And it's important. This group's important to understand whether they were perfect and there was just something about the way you talked about the offer that didn't quite land for them, or why they weren't perfect for the offer and actually they're right, the offer wasn't for them. And how can you bring that filtering into your funnel earlier to make sure they're not wasting time getting on a sales call with you when actually it's not going to be for them in the end anyway. And then there's the wider audience. Now you have to be a bit careful with the wider audience, because people obviously follow you for all sorts of reasons. They may or may not be perfect ideal clients, but it's still useful to gather their views, especially if you haven't had that many clients yet. It's still useful to see where people are at and understand the wider picture. And so you can sort of start narrowing down, that person isn't really where they're experiencing it. That's not really what I can help with. Okay, these are the people I can help, and start narrowing your message that way. So yeah, it's about getting them to go out and have those conversations.
There's massive gold there. Thank you, Katie.
I think as well, for the people who were interested and didn't buy, even if you're doing like landing page testing and A/B split testing, like it only tells you so much. It doesn't tell you why the people who didn't move forward, because even any insight you can get on that is it's like peeking behind the veil.
Absolutely. You can see like which part of the page they dropped out on. You can see how much of the video they watched. You can get all this information, but you're just guessing as to what it actually was that turned them off. Where you've got your about me, and that's where they leave the page. You might think, oh my gosh, they just hated me. But actually, maybe the doorbell went. And by the time they got back, they were distracted and didn't come back to it. And, it was just a coincidence, So I think you can get a lot of good information from that sort of data, especially if you have it at scale. So if you have hundreds and hundreds of people clicking on your page, you can get some really good data from that. But if you're talking about something where maybe you've got a group program and you're aiming to sign up 5 people, you're probably not going to have hundreds and hundreds clicking on that page, because that's probably not how your marketing is going to work. You might have between 20 and 100 to get that number. Your data is going to be limited, so it's very hard to actually extrapolate anything useful from it, anything that's going to have any sort of significance. So being able to layer that on top of the conversations and things like that, I think is really, really valuable.
In terms of the conversations themselves, and how are you analysing them? Are you making use of AI to help you and so on?
It's something I've been dabbling with. It's very interesting the way it's going. Like, I used to sit there with a mound of Post-it notes, a mound of colour pens, every transcript printed off, and just go through them first, like systematically, and then sort of marking them up, and then go. And
I call that the nest of paper.
Yeah, that's it. Absolutely. And it took days. But now I've been playing with a few tools, and the one I really like is, I can't remember what it's called. It's one of the simplest ones, actually. You put in all your transcripts, you tell it your research questions, and then it pulls out the findings against each question. But then you can click on them, you can see exactly what quotes it's got that have made it come to this conclusion, and then you can go back and check whether it's got the context right and things like that. Because I found that does save a lot of time, but also it does also tend to sort of pull things out of context and really make big mental leaps, as to assumptions of why people have said something and things like that. So it's got that level of transparency of, this is how I got to this answer, so that then I can go back through, see which ones I agree with, which ones I don't, which ones I can build on. So it's kind of a hybrid model now of how I do it. And it's definitely sped things up a lot, and it definitely helps a lot. And it has definitely helped me pick up things that I might not have done otherwise. But at the same time, there's a lot of false positives, and it has definitely picked up things that when I've looked at them, I've gone, there's really actually not anything in that, or you've misunderstood how they've meant that word. And, so.
That sounds like a tool built specifically for market research, is it?
It was, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There are so many of them. I'm trying to keep on top of it, but I'm really, really struggling to keep on top of every single one. But
if you manage to remember before the episode goes out, we can perhaps put it in the show notes. And
yes, I will. I'll look it up afterwards, and I'll send you what it's called, so you can put it in the show notes, because it's pretty good. But what I liked about it as well is that financially it's quite accessible. It's not like you don't have to sign up for hundreds of pounds a month plan if you just want to analyze one study. So it's something that can be done by the smallest businesses.
And the conversations, should you be doing them yourself, or is it actually worth getting someone else who's maybe a bit more objective to the situation to speak to people to find out what they really think? There's a word for the bias, isn't it, where you're speaking to the person, so you say what they want to hear, not what.
Yeah, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
There are pros and cons to both. So I think the actual ideal situation is to have a bit of both. So you're in there doing a few yourself, but you've also got an objective expert doing a few as well.
Yeah, because you can triangulate then, can't you?
That's it. Yeah. I work with clients in all sorts of ways. Some clients do them all themselves. Some I take it completely off their hands. But I think the ideal is to have a mixture. And the reason is that I think it's really, really valuable to have the conversations yourself, because then you are in the conversation. So you get that sense and that feeling of it. It's all very well me coming and saying, oh, people said this and this is my evidence for that. But unless you've been there in the feeling of it, if it contradicts what you already thought, it's quite hard to take that on board fully. Whereas if you're in it, you're sort of getting that yourself. That's one part of it. And the other part of it is actually, it's a really good way to build that relationship with a member of your audience or a client or whatever. It builds the relationship stronger. I have had several clients in the recently who have done their market research interviews. Obviously, we never sell on a market research interview. We don't even let people buy if they ask. That's absolutely not on the agenda. One client I had in sort of December, January time got in touch with me the other week to say that of the 6 people she interviewed, 2 had been in touch with her to sign up for her high ticket program, and a further 3 had taken one-to-one, like 1-hour calls from her. Like, and she didn't pitch those to them. She wasn't even particularly describing her service. She was just literally talking to them and getting to the bottom of what was going on for them. But whether it was because she was able to then up-level her marketing in the weeks following that, or whether it was the relationship building, I suspect a combination of the two. She actually got clients from it. So there's a lot to be said of building those relationships.
It's a business that comes along and actually
Yeah.
shows real interest in listening to what you have to say and putting your interests truly first.
Absolutely, yes. And the funny thing about this is that it only actually works if it's not your strategy. If you're going into the research thinking, I'm going to get clients out of this, people will see straight through it. The energy will be different and it won't work. But just the exercise of doing it and being open and being like that pressure-free environment, it's even more valuable than like on a sales call. People will open up, but they know ultimately they're going to be sold to. So there's still that sort of slight tension in the air, slight like guardedness, either because they really, really want to work with you and don't want to say something that's going to make you say you're not a good fit client, or they're really a bit hesitant about it and don't want to back themselves into a corner like you often get in sales calls where they use like all the sort of linguistic acrobatics to sort of corner you with like, well, but you said that was your problem and you said you wanted this and you said you agreed that this would help. So why aren't you buying it? And you're like, people have always got that on in the back of their mind. So it's hard to open up. But in that no pressure, open environment, people can really relax and you can have those deeper conversations and it really builds the relationship. So that's the pros of doing it yourself. But obviously, as you mentioned, confirmation bias, it is very hard. I do say to people, obviously, before they start their conversation, empty your mind of any preconceptions you have. Don't think about what you expect them to say. But it's very, very hard to do that in practice because we are people, we are humans. Even as someone who's been trained in doing this sort of interviewing, it's something I have to be really conscious of as I'm going through the conversation myself. So it does help to have that other perspective who can go down those avenues that you might have missed because they said the thing you were expecting to hear and they said something else. And then you follow the thing you were expected to hear, but the something else was where the gold really was. So yeah, it's really beneficial to have both.
Do you have any either go-to or perhaps more interestingly counterintuitive questions that you ask or you get your clients to ask?
Oh, let me think.
Pete's always on the hunt for great questions.
Yeah. My favourite one, I don't know if you say this was counterintuitive, but my favourite question to ask that I get everyone to ask every single time is at the end, when you're wrapping up, say, is there anything else you wanted to tell me? Or is there anything that I should have asked or that you expected me to ask that I didn't? And what you'll get there is one of two things. They will either tell you some complete gold that you completely missed, that they've been dying to share with you and you just hadn't asked the right question. Or more likely, they will repeat what they think the key thing from that interview was. So they'll repeat what they think the key points that they gave you were. And that is really, really interesting in pulling out what their absolute priorities are, what they think the most important thing is, because that's likely to be the thing they're going to pay the most attention to if you are talking about it in your broader marketing.
I think people often just accidentally ask leading questions as well, or questions that aren't very generous that it's easy to give a very short answer to that don't encourage longer answers and more depth.
Yes, there's certainly different question styles. The ones that come with, you never ask anyone anything that just can have a yes or no answer because the risk is that's what you'll get.
Did you like it?
Yeah, that was fine. But yeah, leading questions, like you say. So anything that pre-frames the answer in the question, like, isn't it terrible? Well, this is a really obvious one, but isn't it terrible that blah, 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 or don't you just love da, da, da? Or, it can be much more subtle than that as well. Even just saying, do you agree that this is the case is leading because more people are more likely to say yes. It has to be, you have to balance the question with, do you agree or disagree? So that people feel just as comfortable saying disagree as agree if you really want the answer. So leading questions is a really big one. And the other thing I find, the other bad habit that you really like, even I have to really sort of hold my tongue, is people don't like silence. So they'll ask a question, pause, the other person will be thinking, and people just can't help themselves. They start suggesting possible answers. Maybe it's this, could it be that, da, da, da. And immediately you've lost that initial, you've lost the most valuable bit of information you're going to get, which is the first thing they think of. I mean, the first thing they think of, it often isn't as deep as the question can go. You should probe further and further, but that first knowing what springs to mind first for them is really, really important. Being comfortable with the pauses and letting them think. I always say to people, even if you don't have anything to write down, just pretend to be taking notes. If you feel awkward, just pretend to be taking notes, because then no one's going to think it's weird that there's silence.
Great tip there.
I'm a recovering silence fella.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it takes a bit of experience, and it takes a bit of almost bravery just to be comfortable with it.
It does. We're sort of conditioned not to like silence, don't we? If there's silence, it usually means someone's got something they don't really want to say, which means it's going to be awkward.
Yeah, my radio editor, podcast editor side of me is dying to cut out the gap before it's already happened. Almost.
Yeah. But those pauses are, as valuable as, knowing how long it took them to come up with the answer. Were they straight in, or is it considered? They're so valuable as well.
In everything. This is a bit tangential to your experience area, Katie. I know you've got a podcast, but everything you're saying can be done well in practice by having a podcast, which is something that we love pitching to people, being in conversation, and a podcast being the most ideal place to do that. The idea that silence can be valuable, that some of the best questions isn't jumping in and trying to give your guest an answer to try and help them, like letting them sit with a thought for a little bit and then pulling the answer out of themselves. Or even Tim Ferriss, I think, very early on in podcasting, more recently gave that question that you mentioned as a key part of what he does. Like, what didn't I ask you that you would have liked to have been asked as part of this conversation? And in my freelancing career as podcast production, I often find myself with clients who are seeking out guests that may be their ideal client. And the podcast interview space is the ideal place to ask these questions. Admittedly, the confirmation bias sometimes falls into play there, because you're not just thinking about what you get from them, but also what your listener, who, just like on this podcast, what the listener might be getting. But yeah, the podcast frame seems to be ideal to practice the things you're looking for, and maybe even be the greatest marketing exercise you could do in today's age.
I think that's a great point. And interviewing for a podcast is different. I've just started interviewing my first guests for my podcast. And the one bit of advice I got from someone I was at co-working with just before I did it was, don't ask really long questions where you give your opinion first and then ask them, sort of to elaborate. Give them, ask short questions and give them space to answer. And I could hear myself sitting there going, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, just get to the question. Da, 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 da.
It's like watching Russell Brand. He spends about a minute asking a question. I'm like, dude, just ask the question.
But it feels like a different space, but it's sometimes hard to take previous knowledge to what you're doing in something a bit different than what you're used to. But
you're right. It's the same skill essentially. And I should be channeling that sort of energy into the interview rather than this is a podcast and it's kind of vibe. Yeah.
You said there, Katie, that you've recently started interviewing guests for your podcast. Does that mean that is it a new podcast, or previously were they solo episodes?
So it's been around since last June, so almost 9 months now. But yes,
well
it's always been solo episodes. But I got to a point where there were ideas I wanted to explore and explain, but they were other people's concepts. And I thought, wouldn't it just be so much more valuable rather than having me misremembering things and doing making a hash of it, if I just bring this person on and let them explain it themselves. And so that's what I did. It's I've started off with a couple of people who have been mentors of mine. I've been on their programs and courses and things. But my aim with them is for them to be, because all my episodes are very short, between 15 and 25 minutes. And my aim is to keep these guest ones the same. So it's we have something that they're going to talk about, and that's what we talk about type thing. I think that's one of the things in the interview where I was so right, let's just get straight to the point. This is what I want you to talk about there. And I think I need to relax a bit more. But yeah, we'll get there.
In a year's time, you two will be doing interviews from your garden.
Yes.
It's the podcasting progression.
So I'm curious, why did you start the podcast?
I started the podcast mainly because I was absolutely fed up I was doing a lot of my marketing in a Facebook group. And as I alluded to earlier, the Facebook group, when you can deliver the most insightful, best live ever, and then it just kind of goes down people's feeds and gets lost in the ether. And oh yeah, if I had better processes, I could probably be downloading that and clipping it up and things like that. But ultimately, it's not there somewhere where people can find it. So I started it really as a repository for sharing my thoughts about marketing and understanding your ideal clients and things like that, somewhere where people could find it and go back to it. But as time's gone on, I realized that the real benefit I was getting from it was how much it helped me better articulate my ideas. And it did build my authority in the market, because whereas, yes, technically anyone can set up a podcast, I think if you do, you're saying, I'm prepared to stand by these ideas, and, you're showing up with more conviction, aren't you? So it changed my whole mindset towards my business and the way I show up, way more than anything that I'd done before. So that was a side benefit I really wasn't expecting.
I'm going to ask Rob the same question he asked me with a guest for Help Before You Sell we interviewed yesterday. Say, Rob, did you give Katie that brown packet with the money in it? Because it's like, shh. Yeah, it's absolutely on point with. I mean, I didn't know how you were going to answer that question, but it's absolutely on point with our beliefs and understanding and philosophy of podcasting. Really, that it's that engagement with your thoughts really is one of the biggest reasons, not how many hundreds of thousands of people are downloading and listening to it. It's what you get personally as the business owner out of forcing, in inverted commas, yourself into an environment where you have to continue to articulate what you think, how you feel, why you think and feel those things in that way. So really happy to hear that you've experienced that.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. And like I say, well, I wasn't expecting at all. So that was a real bonus, because I've been trying to find my voice for a while. So it was good. But even as like the original intention of having it as somewhere to keep all my ideas and sort of, I was going to say teachings, but that makes me sound like some cult leader, doesn't it? But you know what I mean.
There's certain words that you should never use. So market research is one, and teachings is another.
But at the same time, we've talked to people who use their podcast episodes as assets. Like if you would hear common questions, the live stream gets washed away in the Facebook algorithm, but your podcast episode surfaces again when someone asks you that question and you say, hey, I've got an episode.
Yeah, going back to the whole help before you sell, it does mean now if people ask me a question, I can, talk to the answer, then say, look, I've got a whole episode about this if you want to go and listen to it. So where they'll get more depth than I could necessarily give them in the conversation we're having or the call or whatever it is. So it's really useful from that point of view as well.
I reckon, Pete, you'll have that automated soon where if people email you with certain words in the email, it'll fire off emails to specific podcast episodes.
There is actually, before we perhaps move away from podcasting, Katie, I'd like to ask you, as someone who's been doing podcasting industry stuff for a little while, the analytics themselves that are provided by podcast hosts and by Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all those things. I wondered if from a professional mindset, you've approached those statistics in your podcast and whether you find them useful based on your background.
I'll be honest, I don't dive too deeply into them. I look at how many downloads I get within that first week so I can see how well the title's landed, because I know I've shared it, I know where I've shared it, and therefore I'm sharing it to my email list, to my LinkedIn followers, with people who should be interested in this. So if they're not, I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Why hasn't this one landed in the same way, and things like that. And I do go, because I publish on YouTube as well. So I go and look at the watch stats and, how long people are watching for and where people are dropping out and things. But I'll be honest, I haven't dived that deeply into it, mostly just because of a timing issue. It's enough for me to get an episode out every fortnight at the moment without having to spend a long time analyzing all of that. So, but now I'm in that rhythm, I've got my processes down. It doesn't take me as long as it was. I guess optimizing is going to be the next step. So that's what I will be looking at. Yeah.
Well, you're probably in a good position now too. Like you've got enough time under your belt. You've kind of finessed your episode style and changed things up as you've grown as a podcaster, and it'll probably be better looking at it now than if you looked 6 months ago. Or...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course, having more episodes there helps as well. Yeah. Yeah. What do you think are the most important ones to look at?
For me, I try not to look at downloads so much anymore. That first 24 hours can be important. It really depends on the goals of the podcasters that I talk to. These days, the hot button word is listener engagement, which I think is why YouTube is a very strong place for people to check that stuff, because you get to see how many minutes they watched before they dropped off, and then get that special number that tells you how special YouTube thinks you are and the episode that you made. But I find part of the reason I asked you about that for the analytics background is because I often find I have to kind of divine what the listener engagement component for RSS audio-only podcasting is like. Like for a client, I might look at, for any particular month, how many episodes are viewed for every other episode they've released before this month, to see how many listens they get this month compared to what they go back and look at. Because we know that the timing perspective for any one episode is difficult unless it's in Spotify or Apple directly. But if you can kind of combine them all together and get a number that says, okay, this is informational. If they are getting one bit of information and seeking more, then that's a good thing. And that's telling us that podcast content is good. Whereas if it's a news podcast and they're going back to old episodes, you got to wonder, well, is there something else here? Like, is it not just the information that's important? Are they just great to listen to? Or are they very funny? Like I kind of find putting things together in weird ways is the best way to get the most out of it, not just taking it at face level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Katie, you mentioned when you started talking about your podcast that anyone can start a podcast, and that is true. That's one of the things that we say. If you've got something that can record your voice, then you can start a podcast. But not everyone can continue a podcast. I think the statistical average is 7 episodes. I think on average, most podcasts don't get beyond the first 7 episodes. Once that initial kind of euphoria of, hey, I'm doing something new and I'm getting out there. So a couple of questions. Well, firstly, congratulations for going for 9 months. But the question in there is that have you ever thought about giving up, and what's kept you going?
Yeah, so I'd be lying if I said I haven't, because like I say, especially in the early days, it was taking me a long time to put each one together. Almost at the expense of any other marketing. But I guess what's kept me going is a really strong belief that this is a good thing to be doing. This is going to be valuable to my business long term. In 5 years' time, I can still be coming back to these episodes and using them, and so on. I think one thing that a lot of people struggle with, and that I found hard, was, like you say, once you use up that initial bank of episode ideas, where do you go? But I'm lucky enough that I've been in business for a long time. I've been, like I said, I had the Facebook group where I used to go live quite a lot. I've been able to go back through those, but also just using any and every conversation and touch point you have with your ideal clients or current clients, a question that comes up in a call, or just a flippant thing someone might say, and you suddenly think, well, hang on a minute, I have views on this. And, could spin off a whole episode. I've so far largely resisted using AI to come up with episode ideas for me. What I've tended to use AI for is if I've got an idea for an episode, but I'm struggling to articulate exactly what I want to say, or I'm worried I might have missed things out, I ask AI to bullet point the episode for me. And then I look at it and I look at all the ways I disagree with what the AI has said. Because I'm like, this is my point of difference and this is where I'm adding to the conversation. And then I use that to frame the episode around. But yeah, I think the main reason I've not given up is that sort of strong belief that this is going to pay long-term dividends. And my listenership isn't huge right now, but that's probably a good thing, because I'm still finding my feet and getting good at it. I went back to my first Facebook lives, and I've got the camera down here and you're looking up my nose, and they're just awful. And I'm so glad that no one was watching. But it's building a skill, and it will only get better and better. And if I stop doing it, I'm going to stop getting better at it. So,
And in the short term, I guess, shorter than maybe 5 to 10 years of a podcast existing, have you seen any benefits or throughput for your business that shows the podcast to be valuable as well?
Yeah. So like I say, I'm really bad at actually tracking things and where people come from. I don't have UTM set up or anything like that. But one thing that I have definitely noticed is that I used to have to go out and ask people if I could be on their podcast. I used to have to go out and ask people if I could be in their summits. Now those people are coming to me and they're inviting me onto their summits and they're inviting me onto their podcast. And they're generally a good fit as well because they've seen what I'm about and what I can say and what I can contribute to it. So that's been a definite thing that I can definitely attribute to the podcast.
Case in point, this conversation.
Yes, well, yes, absolutely. In terms of actual clients, like I say, it's very hard to say because I've also picked up my LinkedIn activity around the same time. And, my focus sort of shifted, so I can't pull out exactly what everything is. But
attribution's really hard anyway.
Yeah.
But as long as you get a sense of the momentum and the sea change, I think
that's it. Yeah. And like I'm saying, like the way I'm talking about things, the way I'm carrying myself, the conviction with which I'm showing up with my content and my views. I mean, you could say that contributes to getting more clients. Then you could, if I'm attributing that to the podcast, then I guess, that's the sort of proof there as well.
But it's meeting your goals too.
Yes.
Like I love that so many people hit like the straight line. They go podcast equals funnel equals clients equals signature equals millions of dollars. But it can be the intangible assets like reputation. People ask me to attend instead of me asking them, and having a body of work that points towards that intangible kind of momentum that you can build that can lead to other things. I think that's brilliant. I love hearing those stories.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I think this has been a great conversation, and I think I was saying to a guest yesterday that every new guest we have on seems to expand my to-do list. So from now on, no more guests, please.
So the only other question I have, Katie, is there anything that we haven't asked you about helping before you sell that we should have done?
He was making notes earlier.
Brilliant question, Pete. No, I think this has been a great conversation. I've really enjoyed having it with you. I listened to your episode on empathy and, understanding ideal clients before, obviously. And I was listening to it again today because I enjoyed it so much the first time. I also thought, I'll have a listen to that. And
that was about the empathy map, wasn't it?
Yeah, you're talking about the empathy map and things like that. And I think that is such a good tool and such an important thing to focus on. So if I want people to take away anything from today, it's to use that kind of thing, but to get the information from the clients, not from your own head. So that's the thing. Go out, have those conversations, make those relationships, listen, see what people are saying, and use that to sort of inform everything that you do.
Maybe not to expect too much from one conversation, or to look too much into one conversation.
No,
but
it's accumulation.
If you start to hear people saying the same things, like, okay, well, maybe there's something to pay attention to there.
Absolutely, yeah. It's accumulation of the, building that understanding over time.
I don't think we've used the word trend yet, but we probably should, being a market researcher in your background. Build that trend.
Yes.
Well, on behalf of the listener and three of us, Katie, thanks for sharing your expertise here on Help Before You Sell. Great to be connected with you and to know you, and look forward to seeing where the relationship goes in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think, the podcast is a brilliant one. I love podcasts anyway that have multiple hosts so you can all bounce off each other. It just makes the whole thing so much more entertaining. So, keep up the good work, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Help Before You Sell, sponsored by Activate Your Podcast. To activate your podcast and help the people who most need you and your services, head to activateyourpodcast.com/help. If you found this episode helpful, please also leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And remember, help more to sell more. See you next time.